But I would like to welcome Dr. Curran to join us from Virginia Tech, and he's going to share about animal health after flooding and things that we need to think about. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Well, it's a very small group. Jane and Jack, looks like you're the only two currently here. And so certainly I will be glad to answer your questions and directly answer those as best I can. The information I have tonight's relatively short information to share with you. And then we can talk about your questions related to this topic or anything else that you want. As Amy said, my name is Dr. John Kern. I'm the extension veterinarian here at Virginia Tech. And so I'm going to talk to you about flooding and things in the short-term aftermath, and then middle and longer term things to think about. So, you know, we have had quite a number of floods. I was born in 1967, but I can't remember Camille. Hugo, I do remember very well. I was a student here at Virginia Tech when Hugo came through. We actually had I'm from Southwest Virginia, and we had some alfalfa down that got 10 inches of rain on it when Hugo came through, of course. And then you can go all the way back up through there to our other hurricanes that have hit part of Virginia, not necessarily Southwest Virginia as much, but then we get the Hurricane Helene, and you know, my personal experiences, you know, my mom, talked to her on Friday night, and their basement had water in it, and that house was built in 1972 and not anywhere near a water source. And it had inches of water standing in the basement. That Friday night, that was just, as I finally figured out Saturday morning, was just seeping up through the concrete. Creeks got redirected on the farm I grew up on and went places that I'd never seen them and that sort of thing. And so, you know, and so things were relatively tough, and really tough for some of you guys in your neck of the woods as well. Certainly water was places that I'd never seen in my lifetime. There was a flood in 1976 or 7. That would have been the next closest thing that flood wise of what I saw. But you know, here's a deal that was taken, video that was taken back then, day or two after the rain had stopped. I believe this video is from one of my colleagues, Lisa McCormick, who helped me put this thing together actually in East Tennessee, but just to give an example of how bad things were and that sort of thing. You know, as we go through from a flooding situation, we have some immediate issues to try to take care of. Obviously, the people are important things. Then making sure the livestock have access to feed and water and are safe and that sort of thing. We then move into some short-term disease and health risks, short-term, medium-term, and long-term nutrition impacts. And then in very limited cases, are we going to see long-term health impacts on livestock, you know? So, you know, we're well past this today, but, you know, just trying to make sure your animals aren't stranded, and that you can locate them, and fences and that sort of thing were a big issue, and all that stuff, and any sort of injuries that may have occurred from trees down and that sort of thing. Survey feedstuffs and hay stuff. Hay is the biggest deal, you know. Not unusual to see hay that has been washed away by creek water or had water standing do it and that sort of thing. Water quality in the short term. Then we start moving to what's in our pastures and that sort of thing. That was a bigger issue when we had the derecho back in 2012 or whatever. We had a lot of issues with a lot of fiberglass, a lot of debris in pasture fields and hay fields that cause concerns. When we have trees that have leaves on them, then we have issues with wild cherry trees and concern with the wilted wild cherry trees causing cyanide poison in the short in the short term for the first few days that we have to worry about. In the short to middle term, more exposure to clostridial disease are diseases that are found somewhat in the soil and have spores and that sort of thing. So clostridial diseases, anthrax, luckily, we don't see much anthrax in Virginia, and we see even less in Southwest Virginia. Some other parts of the state we do occasionally see anthrax in, but we don't see that. E. coli and salmonella, not so much for livestock. Salmonella would be primarily if the cattle, for whatever reason, were drinking out of water that was left standing where it had been running, and there were puddles and new ponds and those sort of things, and birds came in and populated it with salmonella. Anytime you have standing water, leptos is going to be a bigger issue and that sort of thing. We're past the initial incidents where we would have potentially lepto with problems caused by the cirivars that just cause animals to be sick. We should be past the incidences of problems associated with abortions and increased abortions and stuff that occur with that. Parasites, because of the time of year this occurred, parasites weren't really a big problem for either the flood we had or the more minor flood that you had more recently here. Foot rot would just be from the cattle standing around in more muddy situations in water and damaging the skin associated with that and causing problems and issues from that standpoint. Nutritionally, our single biggest issue would be hay that got soaked with water and really inundated with water, that we would have increased mold growth in it and that sort of thing. So if there was hay that got significantly put into water and stuff, really should have fed that out right away, which was a little difficult to do because we still had some grass for a lot of us and that sort of thing. But if we have that hay left over that was left setting in water and that sort of thing, really we ought to be thinking about rolling that out and using it as fertilizer and not as hay, particularly as we move into how long that feed stuff's been around now. Any of our feedstuffs, grains and stuff that got wet in the short term should have already been addressed by now. The water being clean and mineral, the minerals, bags that got wet and that sort of thing would potentially be an issue. And as I mentioned earlier, just the debris and stuff that's on the forages that might cause problem. We're past the issues with cherry and oak and buckeye trees being poisonous and that sort of thing, so we don't have to worry about that at this point. But if we think about floods and bad times moving forward and that sort of thing, something we would think about. Long-term reproduction, there's a lot of talk about this and flooding in Louisiana and stuff. They think they've identified some issues. To be honest, I'm not particularly concerned about this for you guys in deep Southwest Virginia and that sort of thing. So I don't think if it didn't happen right afterwards, I don't think we're going to see this long-term and that sort of thing. And any long-term mortality and diseases, we should be out about past most all of the problems associated with that by this point. And if you're trying to get government assistance and that sort of thing, I think it's fair to be totaling all that up, because we shouldn't really see much more from that, And so, what we would have seen as we move down that road, you working with your veterinarian to look and see what might be going on with the animals in the short term, getting rid of any animals that might have been affected with any of those things that we mentioned before. And then, I hopefully at least, we missed out on almost all of it here in the New River Valley. Our only issue was the particular flooding in that we saw with the New River. We just had a lot of rain, but we were able to handle that. Looking at least from the perspective of where I grew up in Smith County and that sort of thing, we did not run into the issues where we were going to have to, we lost excessive numbers of cows and had to worry about it from that standpoint and everything. So hopefully you guys did not. We can talk about that more. Like I said, when we get done with the few slides that I have put together, I'll open the meeting up for discussion, and there you go. So that was just a brief overview of the short-term deals, moving on to the long-term deals. And with that, since we are a relatively small group, I will open it up to any questions that you guys have with regards to your particular situations, which is what I would like to address, or general questions that you might have. So if you'll give me those, either type them into the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask those questions, I'll be happy to go over that stuff.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and stop the recording. That way nobody has to worry about it.
Fair enough.